Well, hello again and welcome back to the Overcomer video blog. I'm Dr. John Hawkins. I'm the owner of Gateway Counseling Center, located right here in Boynton Beach, Florida. If you'd like to find out more about our counseling center or myself or some of our counselors, you can go to gatewaycounseling.com, gatewaycounseling.com, and kind of find out all about us and what we offer. But the point of the video blog here, we call it the Overcomer, because I've often said this, that life is about problem solving. You know, we get problems in life, and how do we overcome them? And that's possible, you know, with the right mental, spiritual, emotional outlook, frame of mind, equipped with some knowledge and skills, you can overcome the problems that life brings your way. You know, we don't really have any other choice. You know, this is just how life is. The world's not fair. It's not always just, and sometimes bad things happen to good people. So how do we deal with all that? So that's kind of the purpose of the blog here, to, you know, just give you some little tidbits along the way that can help you with that. Now, last week we talked about parenting and the difficulty of parenting. I have a written blog on that on the site, and we made part one of the video. We took 5 questions that parents have wrote in, 5 common questions that parents have about dealing with their kids. And last week, I think we covered 3 of them. And just by reviewing a little bit here, you know, we talked about, first of all, the model for marriage. That God was the one who set that up. You know, he gave us the template for it. We find that in the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve. And he said, for this cause, man will leave his father and mother, cleave unto his wife. And of course, at that time, Adam and Eve were the only 2 people. So they didn't have any parents. God was their parent. But he was saying, this is how it's going to work. You know, children, you obey your parents in the Lord. And then he said, parents, here's your job description. We find this in Genesis. We find it in Deuteronomy chapter 6, that you love God with all your heart, might, and soul. And then you model that to your kids and teach that to them just in an ordinary, everyday way as you're living out life. It's not like you have to sit them down and lecture them about that, because we all know how kids don't like lecturing. You know, how many times have you had the eye roll, you know, from your kids? Like, oh, really, Dad? Well, I've raised 4 with my wife and I, and so I've had plenty of that, you know, along the way. But you're looking for those teachable, you know, moments. And we operate on the principle around here that 1, there is a God, and 2, he has a design for your life. And if he's the creator and designer, then he knows how to make life work. Even in this broken, messed up world, he gives us principles that we can still navigate. So we talked last week about kind of the role. Like, we answered these 5 questions by saying, okay, here's 5 principles or responsibilities as parents that we should be carrying out. So we talked about unconditional love, that was the first thing. How to show our kids unconditional love. That's very foundational, because that's what sets the stage for everything else. You know, discipline, impacting our children, winning their heart, because that's key. We can't impact their life in a positive way if we don't win their heart. If they don't know they're loved unconditionally, we're glad to have them as, you know, part of the family. And it doesn't matter what they do. They don't have to earn our love. We just give it to them. That's how God gives his love to us. So we talked about that, how to spend time, how to develop that. We talked about spiritual authority. Spiritual authority is the basis of parental authority. Kids are challenged today not to have to listen to, you know, any authority. They can do their own thing. Sadly, they're taught in the schools, you know, keep things quiet from your parents. You don't have to listen to them. You know, you can do what you want to do. And we live in an age of no absolutes. Everything is relative. And philosophically, if people were philosophically honest, nobody wants to live in that kind of culture where there are no absolutes. Everybody can do what they want. So, you know, if I like your car, I can shoot you and take your car. That's basically what that all leads to. It's like whatever I feel is right. You know, I mean, that was back in the 60s, you know, if it feels good, you know, do it. So we're showing how all authority comes down from God, and he gives authority mainly to three institutions in the world. The family, starting with mom and dad, human government, and the church. And all authority is delegated from God, and all authority is supposed to operate their authority as God would, in a fair, just, loving, wise fashion. Unfortunately, because it's a broken world, we know that doesn't always happen. And people in authority sometimes take advantage of people, and do wrong things with that authority. But what we're teaching our kids is the difference that ultimately God's authority trumps all other authority. If I'm faced with a choice of obeying God, what he says, or obeying man, and if what man says is totally opposite, if obeying man, I would be disobeying God, I have to go with God and suffer the consequences, with man. But this idea of teaching our kids spiritual authority so that when they're out from under our roof on their own, they have that built into them and they would respond directly to God. And then I think where we left off, we talked about the consequences for disobedience. And that's what God taught Adam and Eve in the garden. He said, here's this whole world. It's all for you. You've got everything you need, and it's a beautiful paradise. Everything was perfect. There was no sin, sickness, heartache. He said, so it's all yours. Here's the only thing. Don't eat of the fruit of that tree. That became the test point because man was created with free will. And God doesn't want robots. If we're going to love God and obey God, he wants it to be of our choice, of our own free will. So they had the choice to believe God and obey or disobey. And we know how that turned out. They were tempted by Satan. They disobeyed. And we see all the consequences of that in the world because God warned them. If you disobey, the consequences will be death, which is the curse of sin and everything that comes with death. Sickness, disease, man's inhumanity to man, world catastrophes, natural disasters, all of that, is a cause of that. So kids learn early on, what we want to teach them is, hey, you reap what you sow, whether it's positive or whether it's negative. And we're going to give them room to make mistakes, but not fatal mistakes. Mistakes that they can recover from and learn. And we teach them decisions have consequences. So let's focus a little bit more now on these last two things. One is grace and forgiveness. And, the scripture in Ephesians says to dads, don't provoke your kids to bitterness. Now, how do we do that? And he addresses dads. Why does he address dads and he's not addressing moms? Because he's given dad the responsibility to lead his home. And so now he can delegate authority to mom. And so I always taught my kids, hey, if you disobey mom, you're disobeying me. And if you're disobeying mom and you're disobeying me, then you're disobeying God. That's the principle of spiritual authority. But the way we provoke anger and shame and bitterness in our kids is when we discipline them in anger. If we're angry and frustrated, which, hey, you're going to get that way sometimes. Kids have a way of doing that. Like I said, I know, I've raised some. And so there are times when I would send them to their room. So I want you to think about what you did. But in reality, a lot of that was giving me a chance to calm down, cool down so I could go in and deal in a proper, frame of mind. Show them that, hey, I'm not doing this because I'm angry or enjoying this. So we don't want to discipline with anger. And when we do discipline, we want to have the opportunity. We're teaching them, if I do wrong, how do I deal with that? How do I get forgiven by dad, mom, God? That there's a pathway to forgiveness, to restoring the relationship. And forgiveness is we're wiping your slate clean. So we're not going to keep bringing that up. We're not keep saying, oh, you do this, you always do this, you're always this way. No, we'll deal with the issue at hand. And we don't reach into the past and stack all that stuff together. If tomorrow or a week from now they did something wrong, we'll just deal with that. We won't drudge up everything else. So after the discipline, what we're going to do is we're going to have a makeup time and a restoration time. We teach the principle of if I do wrong, what do? I go to the person that I did wrong and I ask them to forgive me. And I let them know, hey, this is how I'm going to change. So with a parent, you know, you're teaching them to ask you forgiveness, and then you're going to teach them, because of that spiritual authority principle, that, okay, I need to also ask God to forgive me. And they learn that when I'm sincere and ask God to forgive me, He will, because that's the nature of God. So now I've made things right with God. I've made things right with the parent that I've disobeyed. And so then I always had like, okay, let's hug, let's restore a fellowship. That's taken care of. You got a fresh start. And that's what kids need. And actually, that's what we need as adults. You know, everybody needs a second chance because nobody's perfect. Everybody messes up. And the reality is, we usually need more than a second chance. We usually need a third, fourth, fifth, you know, and of course, our lifetime. So we're giving them the opportunity to experience forgiveness. And we're going to model that as we give them forgiveness. And we're going to teach them about God's, you know, forgiveness. And then sometimes we're going to show grace. You know, grace is it's giving people what they don't deserve. And so sometimes one of the kids would break a rule, and you kind of see what their attitude is. How are they responding? You know, maybe they own it right away. They you know, acknowledge that. They don't lie about it. They show that they're sorry about it. And you always have the option as the parents to say, I'm going to give you grace. Now, you don't want to just ignore it and pretend it didn't happen. If you're giving them grace, if you're saying, look, this is the rule you broke, this is the consequences we've talked about before, but I'm not going to give that to you because I'm going to extend grace to you. You let them know that you're not overlooking it, but you're intentionally giving grace. But you can't count on me always giving you grace, but because of whatever the reason is, you're giving grace. I'm going to choose to give you grace this time. And so you go ahead and change and don't do that again. Because again, you're modeling. That's what God does for us. We don't deserve His forgiveness. We don't deserve His blessing and the good things He does in our life. But God is constantly giving us grace. And He says that, you know, He pours it out on the just and the unjust. You know, He gives the rain, the sunshine to the farmer that curses him, as well as the one that, you know, blesses him. That's just the nature, you know, of God. And so we want to teach and model grace and forgiveness. And then the last one is teaching life principles. We need something to guide us. So, like I said before, God has a design for us, and that's the best life we could have, both here and forever. That's the abundant life, you know, the life that's overflowing. And so the principles for this life design, they're found in the scriptures. That's the neat thing about the Bible. Everything we need to know about how to live, the principles are there. We just know how to, you know, dig them out. And sometimes saying we need somebody to show us and teach us that. So that's what we're going to do for our kids. We're going to show them, hey, here's a life principle. So we're going to read the scripture, we're going to memorize it, we're going to meditate upon it, we're going to fill our life with it, and we're going to learn to see principles. We're going to teach our kids how to identify principles. We have some things in the Bible that say, do this, don't do this. But there's other things that they're not so black and white. That's where we have to look for principles in that. And you know, a lot of family systems are broken, and broken family systems tend to pass on other broken family systems. And we can have trauma in our life, we can have all different sorts of things. But when we teach our kids these principles, then it'll help them overcome that and break cycles and start a whole new family system. So I hope these things will be helpful to you, just these questions that we've answered and some of these principles that we've laid out. Because remember this, you know, you are an overcomer. We want to help you overcome. So if we can be any help in the future, you just give us a call, go on our website, gatewaycounseling.com, and we'll be glad to help you in any way we can. Until next time, our next video, you really have a great day, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Okay, God bless, and bye now.